There is a truth about relationships and human behavior that most men never realize, a truth so simple, yet so powerful, that once a man understands it, he can no longer be controlled or manipulated emotionally by women. This isn't about playing games, tricks, or trying to dominate anyone. It is about mastering yourself, understanding your mind, and reclaiming the power that most men unknowingly give away every day. Many men spend their lives reacting to women's words, actions, or moods without even realizing it. A delayed text, a cold response, or even a simple disagreement can trigger frustration, jealousy, or insecurity. These emotional reactions give women a kind of power, whether intentionally or not, because a man who reacts emotionally is predictable and controllable. The truth is that power is never actually hers. It only exists because you allow it. Once you recognize this, the entire dynamic changes. Understanding this truth requires a shift in perspective. It requires a man to realize that no one can control his feelings, thoughts, or decisions unless he surrenders that control. Women, like all human beings, respond to the energy and attention we give them. When a man's value is tied to external validation, when he seeks approval or fears losing her attention, he becomes vulnerable. But when a man becomes self-reliant, calm, and emotionally disciplined, he steps out of the cycle of control. He is no longer reactive, no longer dependent on her mood or behavior. This video is about revealing that truth. It is about showing men how to take back their power by mastering their emotions, their reactions, and ultimately, their inner state. When you internalize this truth, women will naturally lose the power they once held over you, not because of manipulation, but because you become unshakable, grounded, and free. You will discover that true influence comes from presence, confidence, and self-mastery, not chasing, pleading, or reacting. By the end of this video, you will understand how to stop giving away your power, how to remain emotionally invincible, and why detachment, self-control, and inner strength are the key to shifting the balance of respect and attraction. Once you embrace this truth, you will never see relationships or yourself the same way again. There is a simple truth that most men never fully grasp. No one can control your emotions unless you allow it. This is the foundation of all power in relationships, not just with women, but with anyone in life. Too often, men believe that women have some mysterious influence over them, that a look, a word, or a delayed message can dictate how they feel, think, or act. The reality is much simpler and much more empowering. Control is never theirs to begin with. It is only given. Emotional control is the key to freedom. Most men lose their power because they react impulsively to external triggers. A text left on read, a small criticism, or even a subtle sign of disinterest can trigger frustration, anger, or insecurity. These reactions are not caused by the woman or her actions. They are created internally. They happen because a man has not yet learned that his emotions, his mindset, and his sense of self are his responsibility. Once you realize this, you begin to understand something profound. Your calm is your power, and your reactions are your choice. Many men unconsciously hand over their power through constant neediness, over-explaining, chasing attention, or trying to fix a woman's feelings. This is the exact opposite of strength. Emotional control is not about suppressing your feelings. It is about choosing your responses consciously rather than reacting automatically. It is about realizing that your inner world is yours alone, and no one else has the right to dictate it. When a man internalizes this truth, his presence changes. He becomes calm, centered, and unshakable. He does not overreact to small provocations. He does not seek validation or approval. And because his energy is stable, women naturally lose the ability to manipulate or influence him emotionally. This is not about domination. It is about self. A man who controls his emotions is like a rock in the middle of a storm. Waves may crash around him, but he remains unmoved. This truth extends beyond relationships. It applies to work, friendships, and life in general. Anyone who tries to provoke you, push your buttons, or sway your decisions can only do so if you allow them to. Emotional control is the shield that protects you from manipulation and empowers you to act from clarity rather than reaction. Ultimately, learning this truth is the first step toward freedom. When a man understands that emotions are a choice, not a command, he no longer gives women or anyone the power to influence his state of mind. He becomes grounded, confident, and in control. And this, above all, is what separates men who live reactively from men who live intentionally. With true power over their own lives, most men don't realize why they consistently lose control in their interactions with women. It's not because women are inherently manipulative or more powerful, it's because men hand over their power willingly, often without noticing. This happens through unconscious reactions, emotional dependence, and the failure to understand one simple truth: your emotional state is yours alone, and giving it away is optional. Men lose control when they let external events dictate their feelings. A text message left unread, a small disagreement, or even a perceived slight can trigger insecurity, jealousy, or anger. In that moment, the man is no longer acting from choice, he is reacting. He has handed his power to someone else, allowing their words or actions to shape his internal reality. This is how influence works. It only exists when it is allowed. The second a man learns to pause, reflect, and respond consciously, instead of reacting automatically, he immediately regains his power. Another reason men lose control is neediness disguised as affection. Wanting love, validation, or approval is natural. But when a man's sense of worth becomes dependent on how a woman reacts, he becomes vulnerable to her influence. Every complaint he apologizes for excessively, every text he overanalyzes, every moment he compromises his values to avoid conflict, chips away at his authority over his own life. Women, like all people, respond to energy. When a man projects insecurity, neediness, or emotional volatility, it signals that he can be influenced, and influence is the foundation of control. Society often reinforces this loss of control. Men are taught to please, to provide, and to fix, while being told that emotions are a weakness. The result is a confusing paradox. Men are expected to be strong, yet when they express strength through calm detachment, it is often misinterpreted as coldness. Conversely, when they react emotionally, they appear weak and give away their power. The solution is neither aggression nor suppression, it is mastery of the self. Emotional control is not about denying feelings, it's about choosing your actions consciously, regardless of external pressures. Understanding why men lose control is liberating because it shifts responsibility inward. No one else holds the key to your state of mind. It's a simple truth, yet most never apply it. Awareness without action changes nothing. The moment a man recognizes his patterns, he can begin replacing reaction with choice, insecurity with calm, and dependence with inner strength. That is when women and everyone else lose the ability to manipulate or influence him emotionally. Ultimately, men lose control because they react before they reflect, chase before they understand, and surrender before they claim their power. Once a man stops doing these things, he becomes unshakable. He moves through life with intention, not chaos. And when that happens, he no longer needs to control others, he simply controls himself. And that is the foundation of true power. If you like, I can now write point 3. Silence is power in the same 500 to 600 word style, so the video script continues seamlessly. Silence is one of the most underrated tools a man can use, yet it is also one of the most powerful. Most men fail to understand that talking too much, explaining themselves, or constantly reacting gives away the very power they seek to maintain. Women, like all human beings, are highly attuned to energy. When a man reacts excessively, speaks impulsively, or seeks to justify his feelings, he reveals vulnerability. That vulnerability is where influence is born and where control slips away. Power does not come from speaking, arguing, or proving yourself. Power comes from presence.com and the ability to withhold reaction. Silence is not emptiness, it is strength. When you refuse to react immediately, when you pause and assess before responding or choose not to respond at all, you are demonstrating control over your emotions, over the situation, and over yourself. That control is magnetic, undeniable, and disarming. Women instinctively feel it, even if they cannot articulate why they are drawn to it. Many men confuse silence with disinterest or weakness. The truth is the exact opposite. Silence communicates confidence and inner strength. It signals that a man is unshakable, grounded, and not dependent on external validation. When a woman says something provocative or attempts to manipulate through emotional triggers, a silent response or even no response at all transforms the dynamic. Instead of giving her the satisfaction of reaction, the man communicates that her words have no power over him. And when words lose their power, so does influence. Silence also creates space for reflection and understanding. Reacting impulsively clouds judgment. It leads to arguments, misunderstandings, and regret. A man who masters silence gains clarity. He observes, he assesses, and he responds from intention, not impulse. This is a hallmark of true self-mastery, choosing your actions rather than being controlled by the actions of others. Moreover, silence can be profoundly magnetic. Absence of unnecessary words can make a woman curious, reflective, and even drawn to the man's calm authority. When used consistently, it shifts the balance of respect and attraction. She begins to sense that this man is not like others, that he cannot be easily swayed, and that his attention is a privilege, not a right. That perception is far more powerful than any argument, plea, or declaration. Ultimately, the power of silence lies in the fact that it returns control to the man. He is no longer at the mercy of emotional triggers. He is no longer a puppet of circumstance. Instead, he is the observer, the decision-maker, and the master of his inner world. In relationships, in conversations, in life itself, silence is a weapon, subtle, invisible, yet devastatingly effective. Once a man embraces it, he begins to operate from a place of unshakable strength, and women, intentionally or not, lose their ability to control him. Silence is not empty, it is mastery, and mastery is power. To truly reclaim your power, it's not enough to master your own emotions. You must also understand how women think and why they behave the way they do. Understanding her psychology is not about manipulation or playing games. It's about seeing reality clearly and responding from strength, not ignorance or emotional reaction. The moment a man grasps this, women naturally lose the influence they once had over him. Women, like all people, respond primarily to energy, behavior, and emotional patterns rather than words alone. They sense insecurity, neediness, or overeagerness immediately, even if it is subtle. A man who reacts emotionally, constantly seeks validation, or appears desperate communicates dependence. Dependence invites influence and control. On the other hand, a man who is calm, confident, and self-reliant communicates stability and strength. This signals that he cannot be easily swayed, and that is when women lose their emotional power over him. It is crucial to understand that women are not inherently manipulative. They are human. They respond to patterns of attention, approval, and energy, just as men do. If a man is reactive, inconsistent, or emotionally unpredictable, it triggers influence. This is not their fault. It is simply human psychology at work. Conversely, when a man is consistent, detached, and grounded, he becomes unpredictable in a positive way, which makes him inherently magnetic and resistant to emotional control. Most men fail to see this because they mistake feelings for facts. They interpret a cold reply, a slight withdrawal, or a disagreement as rejection or loss of control. The truth is that women respond to how a man handles their behavior, not the behavior itself. If a man reacts with frustration, anger, or over-explaining, he is giving away power. If he responds with calm, clarity, and self-mastery, he is reclaiming it. Understanding this distinction is a turning point, a mental shift that separates reactive men from unshakable men. Another critical aspect of her psychology is attention and curiosity. Women are drawn to men who hold their own energy rather than chase theirs. Detachment is not coldness, it is strength. When a man does not need constant validation, he becomes rare and valuable in her perception. His attention is no longer a given. It is earned through his presence, confidence, and composure. That shift in perception is where influence and control fade. Ultimately, understanding her psychology is about seeing human behavior clearly, without ego, expectation, or fear. It is about realizing that influence only exists when you allow it, and that emotional strength and self-mastery are far more attractive than desperation or reaction. A man who understands this truth moves through relationships with awareness, clarity, and calm authority. When you understand how women think, you stop giving them the power to manipulate your emotions. You begin to operate from observation, strategy, and choice. You become the master of your energy, the holder of your calm, and the one who decides how to respond. And in that moment, women without trying lose the power they once held over you. Emotions are powerful, but most men misunderstand them completely. They believe that feelings, anger, jealousy, disappointment, or desire are forces outside of their control. The truth is the exact opposite. Emotions are internal, and only you control how they influence your actions. Mastering your emotions is the turning point where women, intentionally or not, lose the power to control you. Many men allow their emotions to dictate their behavior. A text left unread sparks anxiety. A perceived slight triggers anger. A subtle coldness from her leads to overthinking and chasing. In each case, the man is giving away his power because he reacts without awareness. Emotional mastery begins with recognizing that the stimulus is not the problem, the reaction is. The moment you realize that your feelings are yours to manage, you step out of the cycle of external influence and regain control of your life. Mastering your emotions does not mean suppressing them. Suppression is weakness. Instead, it means observing them, understanding them, and deciding consciously how to respond. A man who has mastered his emotions does not allow fleeting feelings to compromise his composure or decisions. He acknowledges what he feels, but he never becomes a slave to it. This is critical in relationships. When a woman senses that her words or actions cannot disrupt your inner state, the very foundation of control crumbles. Emotional mastery also creates clarity. Reacting emotionally clouds judgment, leads to impulsive decisions, and often results in regret. A man who controls his emotions sees situations clearly. He does not chase validation, he does not overreact, and he does not surrender his standards. He engages with choice, not desperation. And this is what makes him powerful. Power is rooted in self-discipline, not dominance over others. Another key aspect is detachment. Detachment is not indifference, it is freedom. A man who masters his emotions can love, care, and engage fully without being dependent on her reactions. He gives attention freely, but he never begs for it. He expresses himself honestly, but he does not overexpress. This balance of engagement and self-possession is magnetic. Women are drawn to men who are emotionally grounded because they cannot manipulate or unsettle them. Ultimately, mastering your emotions is about reclaiming your life. It is about realizing that no one has the right to disturb your inner peace. Women may test, challenge, or provoke, but your reactions are always your choice. When you stop giving your emotional power away, when you move through life with calm, confidence, and self-control, women and the world around you can no longer hold sway over your mind or heart. The man who masters his emotions becomes untouchable, grounded, and magnetic. He operates from clarity, not chaos, and from strength, not neediness. This is the truth that frees men from manipulation, from emotional dependence, and ultimately, from losing themselves in the pursuit of someone else's approval. Master your emotions, and you reclaim your life, and your power becomes absolute. One of the biggest misunderstandings among men is the difference between detachment and disinterest. Many believe that in order to regain power in a relationship, they must appear cold, distant, or indifferent. This is far from the truth. True detachment is not about pushing people away. It is about holding your emotional center and valuing yourself first. Understanding this distinction is critical, because the moment a man practices healthy detachment, women naturally lose their ability to manipulate or control him. Detachment begins with self-reliance. A detached man does not seek validation from others. His happiness, confidence, and sense of self are not dependent on a woman's approval or affection. This does not make him unloving or aloof. It makes him grounded. He is fully capable of caring, of engaging deeply, and of forming meaningful connections, but he does so without surrendering his autonomy. This is a subtle but profound shift. He gives attention freely, but he does not give it at the cost of his inner stability. Many men confuse detachment with emotional suppression. Suppressing emotions creates tension, anxiety, and eventually resentment. Detachment, on the other hand, is about choosing when and how to invest emotionally. It is about observing situations with clarity and responding consciously rather than reacting impulsively. A man who is detached does not overreact to a cold reply, does not chase after attention, and does not attempt to control outcomes. Instead, he maintains his calm, his boundaries, and his self-respect. This is what makes detachment powerful. It communicates value without words, strength without aggression. Another key aspect is understanding her perspective without losing yourself. Detachment allows a man to be present, to engage meaningfully, and to respond with empathy, while simultaneously protecting his emotional energy. Women, like all humans, respond to emotional energy. When a man is detached, yet fully present, he signals that he cannot be manipulated or unsettled. This balance is magnetic. It draws respect, admiration, and often curiosity, because he is not predictable or needy. Detachment also creates freedom. It frees a man from the anxiety of constantly seeking approval, from the fear of losing her affection, and from the emotional roller coaster of reacting to every situation. When you are free, your decisions are intentional, your energy is stable, and your presence becomes powerful. A woman's attempts at control or influence naturally diminish because they rely on reactivity, and detachment removes the fuel for her influence. Ultimately, detachment is not a rejection of connection, it is a commitment to self. It is choosing yourself before seeking validation from others. When a man internalizes this, he becomes emotionally untouchable. Women no longer hold sway over his moods or decisions, and his energy remains grounded, confident, and magnetic. Detachment, when practiced correctly, is the subtle, silent force that shifts power back to the man, without manipulation, without games, and without aggression. In essence, detachment is freedom. Freedom to feel, freedom to act, and freedom to live without surrendering your power. And that is the truth every man must understand to reclaim his influence over his own life, and over his relationships. One of the most powerful yet often overlooked traits a man can cultivate is presence. Presence is not about speaking the loudest, performing grand gestures, or demanding attention. It is about how fully a man exists in the moment, how grounded he is in himself, and how aware he is of his own energy. Presence is magnetic because it communicates confidence, calm authority, and emotional mastery, all qualities that women instinctively notice and respect. Many men underestimate presence because they confuse it with charisma or charm. Charisma can be superficial. It fades when words stop flowing or circumstances change. Presence, on the other hand, is a steady force. It is visible in the way a man walks into a room, how he listens without distraction, and how he responds with calm clarity rather than impulsive emotion. Presence shows women that a man is comfortable in his own skin, unshakable by their words, and entirely in control of his energy. Presence is magnetic because it signals self-possession. When a man is fully present, he does not rely on validation from others to feel worthy. He is aware of himself, his surroundings, and the dynamics of the interaction, but he does not let them dictate his inner state. Women, like all humans, are naturally drawn to this energy. When a man is present, he radiates stability and confidence, qualities that cannot be feigned or forced. Influence shifts naturally. Instead of chasing attention, he commands respect, and that respect becomes a powerful form of attraction. Another key element of presence is attention without neediness. Most men fail because they give attention too freely, often out of desire for approval or love. A man who is present gives attention deliberately, consciously, and without expectation. He listens fully, speaks thoughtfully, and engages meaningfully, but he never compromises his emotional autonomy. This approach changes the dynamic completely. Women sense that his energy is not easily swayed, and that is the moment they lose the ability to control or manipulate him emotionally. Presence also strengthens decision-making. When a man is present, he observes situations clearly and responds intentionally rather than reacting impulsively. He does not let emotions cloud judgment. This clarity extends to all areas of life, relationships, career, and personal growth. Women naturally respect men who operate from awareness and calm, because they exude stability, a trait that signals maturity, self-mastery, and reliability. Ultimately, presence is magnetic because it communicates a deeper truth. This man is grounded in himself, and his value does not depend on external approval. He becomes the silent anchor in every interaction. Women feel this energy on a subconscious level. They are drawn to it, curious about it, and unable to manipulate it. Presence is subtle, yet it changes the dynamics of relationships completely. In essence, cultivating presence is about being fully in control of your energy, grounded in the moment, and unwavering in your calm. When a man masters this, he becomes magnetic without effort, untouchable without arrogance, and powerful without force. Presence is not a skill, it is a state of being, and it is one of the most important truths a man must embrace to reclaim his influence and power in every interaction. One of the most common mistakes men make is confusing detachment, silence, and emotional control with playing games. They believe that to maintain power in relationships, they must manipulate, deceive, or act in ways that are not genuine. This approach is misguided. True power does not come from games, it comes from strategy rooted in awareness, self-mastery, and deliberate action. Understanding this distinction is essential. The moment a man operates from strategy instead of reaction, women lose their ability to influence him emotionally. Strategy begins with clarity. A man who understands his goals, his boundaries, and his values navigates relationships intentionally rather than being tossed around by emotional impulses. He does not react to every text, every mood swing, or every provocation. He observes, evaluates, and chooses how to respond based on principle, not desire or fear. This approach is fundamentally different from playing mind games. Games are unpredictable, manipulative, and often selfish. Strategy, by contrast, is deliberate, disciplined, and self-respecting. Many men confuse effort with power. They believe that constant attention, over-explaining or chasing approval demonstrates interest or strength. In reality, this behavior signals neediness and predictability, which is exactly what gives others control over their emotions. Strategic men understand that their energy is precious. They invest it carefully, speak when necessary, and act from a position of calm authority. Their presence alone communicates value. There is no need to chase, argue, or manipulate because strategy replaces reaction with purpose. Strategy also means understanding patterns of human behavior. A woman may test boundaries, seek validation, or attempt to provoke emotional reactions. A man operating strategically recognizes these patterns without attachment or ego. He does not take them personally. He does not overreact. Instead, he chooses responses that reinforce his autonomy and self. Over time, this consistency trains others, consciously or unconsciously, to respect his energy, boundaries, and authority. That is how influence shifts without force or coercion, simply through intelligence, disciplined action. Importantly, strategy is not cold or calculated in a selfish sense. It is grounded in self-mastery. A man who practices strategic behavior is free to love, care, and engage authentically. He is not manipulative. He is intentional. His calm composure and measured responses make him magnetic because they demonstrate emotional independence. Women instinctively recognize this energy. They no longer hold sway over him because influence only exists when a man allows it. Ultimately, abandoning the idea of games and embracing strategy transforms the dynamic entirely. Men stop reacting impulsively, stop seeking validation, and stop surrendering their emotional power. They operate from clarity, purpose, and conscious choice. And in doing so, they reclaim their influence in every interaction. The truth is clear. When a man masters strategy over games, he becomes unshakable, respected, and undeniably powerful. Strategy is not manipulation, it is mastery. And mastery is the ultimate truth that frees a man from losing himself in relationships, from emotional dependence, and from being controlled by anyone. Another key aspect is understanding her perspective without losing yourself. Detachment allows a man to be present, to engage meaningfully, and to respond with empathy, while simultaneously protecting his emotional energy. Women, like all humans, respond to emotional energy. When a man is detached, yet fully present, he signals that he cannot be manipulated or unsettled. This balance is magnetic. It draws respect, admiration, and often curiosity, because he is not predictable or needy. Detachment also creates freedom. It frees a man from the anxiety of constantly seeking approval, from the fear of losing her affection, and from the emotional roller coaster of reacting to every situation. When you are free, your decisions are intentional, your energy is stable, and your presence becomes powerful. A woman's attempts at control or influence naturally diminish because they rely on reactivity, and detachment removes the fuel for her influence. Ultimately, detachment is not a rejection of connection, it is a commitment to self. It is choosing yourself before seeking validation from others. When a man internalizes this, he becomes emotionally untouchable. Women no longer hold sway over his moods or decisions, and his energy remains grounded, confident, and magnetic. Detachment, when practiced correctly, is the subtle, silent force that shifts power back to the man, without manipulation, without games, and without aggression. In essence, detachment is freedom. Freedom to feel, freedom to act, and freedom to live without surrendering your power. And that is the truth every man must understand to reclaim his influence over his own life, and over his relationships. One of the most powerful yet often overlooked traits a man can cultivate is presence. Presence is not about speaking the loudest, performing grand gestures, or demanding attention. It is about how fully a man exists in the moment, how grounded he is in himself, and how aware he is of his own energy. Presence is magnetic because it communicates confidence, calm authority, and emotional mastery, all qualities that women instinctively notice and respect. Many men underestimate presence because they confuse it with charisma or charm. Charisma can be superficial. It fades when words stop flowing or circumstances change. Presence, on the other hand, is a steady force. It is visible in the way a man walks into a room, how he listens without distraction, and how he responds with calm clarity rather than impulsive emotion. Presence shows women that a man is comfortable in his own skin, unshakable by their words, and entirely in control of his energy. Presence is magnetic because it signals self-possession. When a man is fully present, he does not rely on validation from others to feel worthy. He is aware of himself, his surroundings, and the dynamics of the interaction, but he does not let them dictate his inner state. Women, like all humans, are naturally drawn to this energy. When a man is present, he radiates stability and confidence, qualities that cannot be feigned or forced. Influence shifts naturally. Instead of chasing attention, he commands respect, and that respect becomes a powerful form of attraction. Another key element of presence is attention without neediness. Most men fail because they give attention too freely, often out of desire for approval or love. A man who is present gives attention deliberately, consciously, and without expectation. He listens fully, speaks thoughtfully, and engages meaningfully, but he never compromises his emotional autonomy. This approach changes the dynamic completely. Women sense that his energy is not easily swayed, and that is the moment they lose the ability to control or manipulate him emotionally. Presence also strengthens decision-making. When a man is present, he observes situations clearly and responds intentionally rather than reacting impulsively. He does not let emotions cloud judgment. This clarity extends to all areas of life, relationships, career, and personal growth. Women naturally respect men who operate from awareness and calm, because they exude stability, a trait that signals maturity, self-mastery, and reliability. One of the most overlooked tools of influence in relationships is absence. Many men underestimate its power, thinking that constant presence, constant attention, or constant communication is the key to connection. In reality, absence is one of the most effective ways to shift the balance of respect and attraction. When used wisely, absence communicates value, self, and emotional independence, and it is one of the clearest ways for a man to reclaim his power. Absence is not about punishment or manipulation. It is about setting boundaries and demonstrating self. A man who understands the power of absence does not chase attention or approval. He does not over-explain, over-apologize, or sacrifice his standards to maintain someone else's interest. Instead, he allows space for himself and space for her to reflect. This space creates clarity, both for him and for her. It forces the dynamics of the relationship to reset, because influence relies on reaction, and absence removes the fuel for reaction. Many men fear absence because they equate it with loss. They believe that if they stop responding instantly, if they step back from constant engagement, or if they prioritize their own life, they risk losing her. The truth is the opposite. Absence creates presence in a new way. It allows a woman to feel curiosity, to recognize value, and to appreciate the man's stability and independence. When a man stops giving constant energy and attention, his absence becomes noticeably, and this noticeability is a form of influence that does not compromise his autonomy. The power of absence also strengthens self-discipline. Men who embrace it learn to prioritize their own life, their own goals, and their own energy above immediate gratification or emotional triggers. They learn that they are the source of their own happiness, not anyone else. This internal grounding makes them untouchable emotionally, because they are no longer dependent on external validation. When a woman senses that her words, moods, or actions cannot disrupt his calm, her influence diminishes naturally. Absence is magnetic because it communicates value. A man who is always available becomes predictable and, eventually, taken for granted. A man who steps back, focuses on his own life, and remains present in his energy becomes rare, respected, and intriguing. Women, consciously or unconsciously, recognize this energy. They no longer have the automatic ability to control him because he is operating from intention, not reaction. Ultimately, the power of absence is a reflection of self-mastery. It is the ability to step back without fear, remain grounded, and prioritize your own energy. It is the silent demonstration that a man's value is not determined by someone else's attention. When practiced consistently, absence shifts influence, strengthens respect, and restores power without manipulation, without drama, and without compromise. In essence, absence is not abandonment, is authority in stillness. It is one of the most subtle yet profound ways a man can reclaim his emotional power and demonstrate that he is unshakable, independent, and in control of his own life. After everything we've discussed, the mastery of your emotions, the power of silence, detachment, presence, strategy, and absence, there is one ultimate truth every man must internalize. No one can control you unless you allow it. This truth is simple, yet it is the cornerstone of freedom, power, and self-mastery. Once a man fully understands it, women and anyone else lose the ability to dictate his emotional state, influence his actions, or compromise his sense of self. Most men spend their lives unconsciously surrendering their power. They react to moods, chase approval, and adjust their behavior to maintain someone else's favor. In doing so, they hand over control of their mind, their feelings, and ultimately their life. But the moment a man recognizes that power is never outside of him, it resides entirely within, everything changes. Emotional independence becomes possible. Influence shifts naturally, and respect emerges organically. This is the final, unshakable truth that transforms not just relationships, but a man's entire life. Understanding this truth requires introspection and discipline. You must examine the moments where you allowed someone else to disrupt your calm or dictate your behavior. You must recognize that no text, no comment, and no reaction from a woman or anyone has inherent power over you. Power exists only when you respond unconsciously. The second you pause, reflect, and respond intentionally, or choose not to respond at all, you reclaim it. This is not about arrogance or emotional detachment from humanity. It is about mastery of self. The man who internalizes this truth becomes unshakable. He operates from clarity, not chaos. He engages in relationships with intention, not desperation. He loves, he cares, and he connects fully, but he does so without surrendering his authority over himself. This balance is magnetic because it is rare. Women instinctively recognize that a man who has mastered himself is not vulnerable to manipulation, not needy for approval, and not reactive to provocation. Influence and control naturally shift to him, not because he seeks it, but because he embodies it through composure, presence, and self-discipline. This final truth also applies beyond relationships. It is a principle that governs all aspects of life, work, friendships, and personal growth. Anyone or anything that attempts to provoke, distract, or destabilize, you can only do so if you allow it. By embracing this truth, you step into a life of freedom and autonomy. You no longer live according to external expectations or emotional triggers. Instead, you become the architect of your reality, the master of your mind, and the holder of your energy. Ultimately, the truth is liberating. No one has power over you unless you give it away. Women may test, challenge, or provoke, but your response is your choice. Your inner calm, your presence, and your self-mastery are untouchable. Once you embrace this truth fully, you reclaim your life, your influence, and your freedom. You become a man who is respected, magnetic, and emotionally invincible. This is the final lesson, the truth that ends manipulation, restores balance, and transforms every interaction.